Hi guys, Mr. Fandrey here. Who would ever thought we were going to have class like this? It just seemed so surreal to me. I guess the first thing I need to do is apologize to you for my appearance. My wife thinks it's kind of distracting. Before the lockdown, I know I needed a haircut, and then the governor locked things down. The haircut places are closed, and I'm kind of stuck right now. So again, I apologize. We're supposed to order some clippers,
Wait a minute. This is ridiculous. No one is going to listen to you when you look like that. They'll be too distracted. Amazon just delivered the package. Let me unpack the clippers and give you a little trim.
Again, guys, I apologize for this brief interruption. I'm going to let Mrs. Fandrey do a little haircut on me. I think you'll take me a lot more seriously that way, and I'll be right back. Hi, guys, I'm back. I think she did a pretty good job. Maybe she's showing off a little bit. I don't know. She thinks I take this Abraham thing a little too seriously sometimes, but I don't know. The more I think about it, it just seems like it's so distracting, and I want you guys to take me serious. So I think I'm going to take a break one more time, real quick. Again, I apologize. I'll be right back. Oh, all right, you guys. This feels a lot better. Let me tell you, it's been a long time, and it's a relief to be this way. So thanks again, and for putting up with that. All right. So the way this is going to work, you guys, the classes are not going to be normal size, the normal length or whatever. We just won't be able to do that. And we'll just keep it short and sweet, and we're going to go over some of the basics, and I'll have a little assignment for you to do. And we'll start at 9:30 in the morning like we always do, but it's not going to last that long, maybe 45 minutes at the tops, if even that long, whatever it takes to get this done. I'm mindful that Father Mike is having 10:30 Mass, so we're not going to interfere with that for sure. So I think we can get the objectives done, especially if I give you a little bit of a talk and then you have a little assignment, something to work on or whatever. That'll definitely fill in the time and make it worthwhile for everybody. So, you know what? I found something really cool. If you guys want to try it, I'm going to send you a link next week, and we could even do Jeopardy online. I basically just email you, and you click on the link, and you have to install Zoom. And so if you install that ahead of time, great. If you don't, we'll just deal with it at that time. But I'll send you a link, install Zoom, and then we should be able to see each other like the Brady Bunch, if that means anything to you, where you see little squares and you can see everybody, and we can play Jeopardy. We can go over the terms, and you guys can actually, we'll just have you raise your hand and say here, and I'll be able to tell by looking at the squares, who got that answer. And anyway, we can try that. If it gets to like too technical and not everybody can do it and all that kind of stuff, if there's any technical problems, it's no problem. We'll just go to plan B, which is this. I can just give you a short little lecture, and then I will send you some documents that you need to fill out. So, all right. So we're going to start out by just reviewing some of those terms, because I really want you to know them by the end of the year. And then we'll go back to some of the Old Testament themes and also some of the Lenten things. So as you remember, I'm just going to do a little bit of review here. We talked about hierarchy, and I emailed you a sheet on the hierarchy. And in fact, one of your assignments is to tell me the hierarchy. A hierarchy is a structure. And even human organizations, they all have a structure. Even your school, for example, you have a principal. And above the principal, you may have a superintendent. Below the principal, you have teachers. And then maybe you have substitute teachers. And then at the very end of the hierarchy would be the students. So the church also has a hierarchy. And I just want you to know what that term means. In a Jeopardy question, it's going to be, what is the hierarchy? It's the structure of the church. Who's at the top of our hierarchy? It would be Jesus himself. Jesus founded the church on the rock, Peter. Peter was our first pope. So you have Jesus at the top, then you have the pope. Then beneath the pope, you have the bishops. The bishops are like all the apostles. And so we have bishops, and below the bishops, you have priests. And below priests, you have deacons. And then finally, you get to the lay people, and we are considered the lay people. And so that's the hierarchy of the church. So when you hear that term in reference to the Catholic Church, just know that it means it's the structure. It's not the authority, it's the structure. And that'll be a Jeopardy question as well. Okay. So bear with me. I know these are kind of dry terms, but they're important to know. And like I've always told you, you guys are going to be the smartest sixth graders on earth. And so the next term I want to share with you is magisterium. Big word, right? But what does that mean? It refers to the authority of the church. Remember, Jesus told his apostles, he who hears you hears me. He didn't say that to the disciples, not to his followers. He's talking to the bishops, to his apostles. He who hears you hears me. He's telling them, so he who hears the church hears Christ. And so magisterium is teaching authority. It's that authority the church has to teach. And we must listen because Jesus said, he who hears you hears me. So we have a duty to listen and to follow. So the magisterium is the authority of the church. I keep saying that because Jeopardy question is going to be, similar to what is the word that represents the authority, the teaching authority of the church, the magisterium. And the structure of the church is going to be the hierarchy. You already know, this is just a quick review, oral tradition and written tradition. Oral tradition, oral meaning mouth. You already know that the church spread for centuries, the first 4 centuries, by word of mouth, and we call that the oral tradition. Comes from Christ, handed down from the apostles. It's binding on all of us. And the written tradition is the scriptures, which the church put together around the year 400. And so we have both oral and written tradition. The Catholic Church honors both of those and accepts both of them. Unlike the Protestants who only hang on to the written tradition and have lost the oral tradition. We talked a little bit about the differences between public revelation and private revelation. So public revelation is all the things you're required to believe, and that is the oral tradition and the written tradition, which means the magisterium, the teaching of the church, as well as the scriptures. You have to believe all of it, because that is part of the public revelation. We also mentioned briefly that public revelation has ended. It won't be added to. There's not going to be any more books in the Bible. It ended with the death of St. John, the last apostle. And so we already have everything we need for salvation in this revelation, both the oral and written traditions. So what is private revelation? Private revelation is when Mary appears to someone, or someone gets a special gift or a special favor from God. Those things can be very important, like Fatima, super important. But the church always holds them in a little lesser of a priority, or not so much priority isn't the right word, I should say a hierarchy. The hierarchy is the oral and written tradition. That's you have to believe. But the second one is the private revelation. When the church makes a judgment on it, it's just saying, hey, this is really good stuff. It's worthy of your belief. But the church doesn't bind you to believe in it. So I know that's maybe a little tricky stuff for sixth graders. Maybe not. I don't think so. But you just know that you must believe in the public revelation. All right, guys, this is a new term. We have not talked about this yet, but it's very important. This one's important to know the difference between what a dogma is or a discipline. And we haven't talked about that yet, but I'm going to tell you why I think it's so important. A discipline is a rule that the church makes up that you have to follow, but it can change over time. That's the thing. If you remember anything, remember disciplines can change. And here's an example of it. A long time ago, before you were born, if you were going to receive communion on Sunday, you had to not eat or drink after midnight. You had to literally fast like that in order to receive communion. And so that was a discipline, a rule. Because of the way people work today and because of how the times have changed with working especially, the church relaxed that discipline and they changed it so that now 1 hour before you go, 1 hour before you receive communion, you should fast. I think you're allowed to drink water, but you're not allowed to eat food. So that is a discipline. Now, a dogma or a doctrine, they never change. It's impossible for them to change because it's the truth. And truth never changes. And why is it so important to know the difference? Because some people today get confused. They'll say, well, I know we're, boyfriend and girlfriend. I know we're living together, but, the church changed its teaching on fasting and on some of these rules. So they're going to change it. It's just a matter of time. They're going to change it on that too. Or abortion. Oh, the church will change their teaching on that. So you're going to be smart and you're going to know the difference. You know that there are disciplines that are changeable and a doctrine will never change. And so whenever you hear a comment like that or you hear somebody say that, right away you're going to know, nah, in the back of your mind, you're going to say, that's a discipline, dude. Those things can change and do change. It has nothing to do with the doctrine. So what's an example of a doctrine or a dogma? An unchangeable thing, a doctrine or a dogma? Well, the divinity of Christ, that Christ is true God and true man, that can never ever change. That purgatory exists, that can never change. It's the truth, it's unchangeable. That Jesus, the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, well, someday the church is going to tell us that that's just a symbol. Impossible. That can never ever change. The commandments, they can never change. It's never going to be okay for a boyfriend and girlfriend to live with each other. Never. It's unchangeable. As unchangeable as the commandments. And why is that? Because God is perfect. God never changes because he's perfect. He's eternally arrived at the truth. He is absolutely perfect, and you don't change what's perfect. It just reminds me, I went to Fatima. Little Jacinta, that little girl who was only 6 years old when all of this started, and when Mary appeared, she never spoke to Our Lady when Mary appeared. She listened and everything, but she never spoke. But when she was dying, Mary appeared to her 3 times in the hospital, and she did then speak to her. And one of the things she asked her, was about, why do people go to hell? Which she said, sins of the flesh are the reason. And she also said that many fashions would come that would displease our Lord. And she said that, you should not follow the fashions. She said the church has no fashions. Jesus is always the same. It just reminds me of that idea of the doctrine and the dogma. They never change because Jesus is always the same, because he's perfect. There's no reason to change. He's eternally arrived at perfection forever. And, that's why truth is the truth, And that's doctrine, dogma. Never let anybody confuse you about what the truth is. When you know something's the truth and they point to something else that changed in the church, it was, you're talking about a discipline. And the disciplines are there for a reason, because with the Industrial Revolution, that took place in the 19th century, people are working more and more physical labor. Then it became very difficult to not eat meat and stuff after midnight. So the church changed that rule to adjust to more appropriate for that time. I wish it was a little stronger myself, but 1 hour before isn't very much. I think we could do more. But that is the discipline. And so that's the discipline that's imposed on the church. Jeopardy question. What's the difference between doctrine and discipline? A doctrine or a dogma, they're interchangeable words, doctrine, dogma, they never ever change. They're the truth. Where a discipline, they can change over time because they're lesser rules that the church imposes for that time period. Transubstantiation. You guys already know what transubstantiation is. That's definitely going to be on our Jeopardy. It is the technical term we use to describe what happens during the consecration at Mass, where the bread and wine are miraculously transformed into the very body, blood, and soul and divinity of Christ. Remember that transubstantiation does not mean that Jesus is inside the bread. That could be a trick question for you. And it's not that it's blessed and holy bread. It's not even bread anymore. The correct answer is always going to be, it's not bread. Only the appearance of bread and wine are left over, and that appearance is what we call the accidents, and you remember that term as well. And that is, I think, I'm going to touch on 2 more, and I know this is heavy stuff, you guys. This is the stuff after the first of the year I think is the most difficult to get through. But once you know these terms, we're going to move on to some, little bit lighter things. So I wanted to tell you 2 more words because you're going to hear them. Heresy. What is heresy? Heresy is basically a false teaching. So if I were to tell you that, hey, that's, the Eucharist is it's just a symbol. Jesus isn't really there. Or if I told you, well, he's there, but he's like inside the bread. Now, whether I had good intentions or not, that's considered a heresy. It's an error. So somebody that says heresy on purpose, and they know that they're going against the church, and they're stubborn about it, and they say, well, I don't believe in purgatory, and I'm just not going to teach that, because in my opinion that doesn't exist. Well, that's heresy. Martin Luther, who started the Protestant Revolution, committed heresy when he said you're saved by faith alone, and he actually referred to the book of James and in the scriptures and said it's the epistle of straw. He said because it didn't agree with him. So if somebody holds on to a false teaching, heresy is a false teaching that somebody is promoting. Sometimes people do it and they don't know because they're just ignorant. So I'm not making a judgment on the person. I'm just telling you it is or isn't heresy. Okay, there's one more term I want to talk about, and then we'll be done with these terms, so hang in there. And that is blasphemy. What is blasphemy? It is according to our definition here, it's a lack of reverence or an insult or an expression of contempt towards God. That's what they do in hell, is blasphemy. And you're like, what do you mean, Mr. Fandrey? What is blasphemy? Well, there was an artist a couple of years ago that did something terrible. He took a crucifix and he put it in a glass of urine, and he set that on display and said, hey, that's art. That's blasphemous. It's kind of like mocking God or showing contempt for God. There's so many examples today. There's blasphemy in music. You have to be really careful what you listen to. A lot of rock music, and I'm not going to diss all rock or get into a big thing on that, but I'm going to tell you a lot of that rock music and a lot of the things in those lyrics, they're from hell. And there's a lot of blasphemy where they mock God, they curse God, they praise Satan. There's a lot of terrible things in some of the music. So, and that's what blasphemy is all about. It's mocking God, insulting God, and that's what they do in hell. And you have to be aware of that. Just want you to know what the term means and aware of it so that you can recognize when you see it. Somebody that makes fun of Mary or making fun of Jesus, or some of these album covers of these rock stars or whatever, they'll put the crucifix up there. Or there was a movie called Life of Brian, a Monty Python comedy movie, and it had all these had Jesus on the cross, and they were all singing, and that's not right. It's blasphemy, and I want you to recognize it and avoid it. It's a very grave sin against God to partake in it or in any way. I just avoid stuff like that is what I would recommend. We went through a lot of heavy terms today, and you're going to see your assignment is to fill out what the hierarchy is. Take a picture of that and send it back to me, and do a little practice quiz on these terms that we talked about today and see how you can do with them. Next week, we're going to have a lot of fun because we're going to try and do Jeopardy. If I can't do Jeopardy, we'll do something along this format. It seems so strange to have the season of Lent and not to be able to go to confession or to have Mass or to do all the things you normally do during Holy Week. And so I strongly urge you guys, say your rosary every day. Do something during Lent every day, especially prayer, and to keep that spirit of Lent going. Next week, we're going to do Jeopardy, and if we have time, we're going to talk about confession, the proper form of confession, and we'll kind of go into some of that next week, too, if we have time. So thank you guys very much. I hope you all have a good week, and I will see you soon.